with the business people, with the technology people in the early phases. You said it. We need to start committing them early. So when I talk with my guys, I do the change management in the ideation phase, and then I do something else in the design phase, and I do something else in the development phase. And then, by the way, now we have built a system. It's fantastic. I have 3 stages left. So commit to deploy means 3 more stages than what the tech guys think it means.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, let's take a use case life cycle. How would we see this how is the perfect change management process? Or no, actually the use case life cycle from idea to production in the perfect book example, how you would like to see this from the user or business perspective. So when should they be involved? Or what's the idea phase? When do we do these things to work in a sort of the right order of attack, the optimized order? Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think so. And you will have to correct me if I didn't. But it's back to what we talked. You should involve people much, much earlier than you think. That's the bottom line of it. And to really talk about the different perspectives, when you bring a lot of different people on board, why are we doing this? Really in the early stage when you are just playing. And
so I give us a lingo now, and then we follow that together to really dissect this now. So now we're in the ideation stage. Someone has a cool idea that we could do AI, and they master up some sponsorship and get some ideas here. So
you bring in the guys that you know are the ones that would always raise their hand and say, I have a question. And you permit them to tell you why this won't fly.
Exactly. In the idea phase.
Good. In the idea phase, because that's when you
it.
will find, okay, what kind of resistance will we meet when we move on? And some things you will be able to take away really early. And the guys that some people say, okay, they don't want to do anything. But what they really do, they are the ones that can see the flaws and see what could stop us. And they know the way that they work or whatever. So they could really be valuable. So the people in the organization, those that are going to use it,
because systematically, then, I mean, like if we go a lean startup kind of idea, I don't want to spend a lot of investment on AI guys like Anders on some things that I can identify in 2 meetings. It will never fly. Bottom line, right?
Yeah, or you could tell Anders that you have this excellent idea and this is what we want, but they are telling us these things won't fly. How can we handle that? Because then Anders can help you solve that, or some things maybe not. And then when you move on, you can tell people that, okay, this is what we're going to do. We know this will be difficult and we can't handle it. So you will just have to live it. Sometimes what people do is try to sell traditionally when they come with changes. They just
push.
Talk about all the good things. Life is going to be great, and this will solve all our problems. And you create a picture that you will never be able to deliver on.
Okay, so now we take one step more. So now we have concluded that the naysayers or the question sayers, who might be, it's both about understanding resistance and change that you will come up with, but maybe also get some good ideas how you define something early. Now we go into some sort of feasibility validation stage. So the idea has gone through, and we are now trying to sort of feature engineer. We're trying to build the system. So what's the change perspective in this validation or prototype stage? What's the change part here?
Again, it's seeing, what we thought in the beginning would change. Is that's what's happening? Yep. And what kind of reactions, again here, bring the naysayers in. What reactions do we get when we try to validate it? But I think this would be the phase where you don't need it as much as in the beginning and then in the next step. But still, they should be there.
Yeah, and then the prototype shows good results. We built the model and it proved successful, and now we say, okay, let's scale this up. So now we go into hardcore development from a small model, and now we're going to deploy it. So we're actually going to not only think about the model itself, but we're going to think about how it's used, how it's consumed, in what stage it fits, and of course technically we're going to put it in production. What's the change management perspective of the development side to deploy it so it will be used?
It's really connecting it to the processes and new ways of working. How will this influence it, and what do we need to do to handle it going forward?
So it's a lot about the usability, right? So we have an AI and it's a recommender system. as an example, but how will it actually be used in everyday life? So in the development side, it's the usability aspect of, this is a great AI, but it's too much information to do in such a short time. I need to simplify the GUI or whatever.
But I think it's a bit more. I can just speak abstractly about one project at least that we try to imply or implement. And we were trying to use AI to simply make the process more efficient for humans. I think that's the best way to use AI. But still, and let me just speak, I can't speak in exact details, but I can mention briefly that we had to set up a process that meant that humans, day after day went through a number of documents and we're trying to say yes or no, we can comply with this requirement or not. If you can comply with the requirement, they can sell a product that they have. If they cannot, then they won't sell the product. And it's a lot of work to go through all the documents and the product descriptions. They have PDF documents and whatnot. But that was what the humans were doing. And they had a huge number of people that went through all the documents and tried to see, do they comply or not by a set of 50 requirements or something.
So it's right? An AI system for RFQ type.
RFP.
Request for proposals.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we said, obviously this is very time consuming for humans to do. Going through a large number of PDF documents is not an easy thing for humans to do. Perhaps we can just help by having an AI system in the loop, so to speak, to search through the things. And then we built a system, and then we had an evaluation, with the people that were accustomed to using it in the traditional way. And they felt, this is a bit strange, Why can't I simply, use my Excel sheets? Why can't I simply, search in the PDF documents in the normal way I do? And we didn't, I would say, do the proper change management in that case. And I'm trying to think, how could we have done it differently? And I think you already said the answer in some way. We should have actually spoken to the people working with this in the beginning and saying, if you were to do this in a more efficient way, how would you like to do it or something? We instead, did it the opposite way and said, okay,
we did something great for you.
Yeah,
this is a present for you. Aren't you happy?
Yeah.
And that is the case in so many solutions of this kind.
Yeah.
And one, of course, is they weren't involved. But then the second part is, anybody can understand, okay, if we save a lot of time, will we downsize? Will I lose my job?
Exactly. Yes.
So, a basic human reaction is, okay, who's going to have to leave the company? And then many say, but then you can spend time on doing more complex stuff.
Yeah.
And that is correct. But then you have to be very clear on, okay, what is the things that you want people to do instead? What kind of skills do they need? Do they have them? And to talk to everybody, because some people actually enjoy going through, filling out Excels. That is, that's fulfilling. Some people have got accustomed to fill in the Excels. Yeah. So they just need to get out of that pattern. Yeah. And some will say, finally I can go and do this. But you need to be clear on that part. So not just involve them, but also have a very clear vision. And I would say that almost every management team miss out here. You don't consider, okay, what do we want to do with these people when we have the AI? What should they do instead? And how do we talk to people? And how do we handle
do we have a story here?
Yeah, the story. Yeah. But also to be very... that's another reason why many projects fail. Okay, if somebody won't move on, what are we going to do? Just because you were right in a position, if you were excellent at filling out the Excels for 20 years, maybe you're not right when you are in a more consultative role or whatever they wanted to do with these people. And then what do we do? Do we help them to train for something else? Do we give them an exit? And managers that's at least my experience. Walk away from that and say, okay, but if they don't like the new job, they will get another. So this is an important part of change management. So, okay, when we have this fantastic tool, what's then going to happen with our group?
And I'd just like to add, because I think it's so often that you phrase AI in the terms that it will replace jobs. And I actually do not think that's the most common scenario. So just to at least give my view on what really happens is that instead of replacing humans, I think they can actually augment humans. And I think, it's a big difference to what AI can do today and what humans can do today. And just to make that, difference clear, AI, for example, can go through a huge amount of data very quickly. It can go through 1,000 PDF documents in a second. A human cannot do that. And then it can recommend perhaps these are potential, pieces of information that you can make use of. And then a human, which has a much broader knowledge and a more generic type of reasoning, can ingest that information in a much more intelligent way. And by combining, the two, I must argue, you have the best of both worlds. So then you have something that can go through a huge amount of data, AI, and you have a much deeper type of reasoning from humans that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And if you just do the human, they can't go through all the data, so you don't have the context. But with the AI and human combined, I would argue you get the best of both. And then you don't replace humans. You simply make them more efficient and increase the quality of the work you do.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I'm absolutely on the same page there. But that is not the way that we see it in society.
Exactly.
Currently, it's a shift in
it's
paradigm.
Not the way it's portrayed, and I think that's a so dangerous view that is being portrayed.
Yeah. But I think this is, I get goosebumps all the time now because it's for me this
Maybe
is
you're just cold.
No, it could be, but it's, I think we are profound in the terms that we are getting into some of the core topics. So one of the core topics is how we really understand AI and how it really benefit. And I can't see it benefiting in any other way than augmented intelligence for the foreseeable future. But as soon as you say that it's a fundament, that's the way AI is going to be done, it means orchestration of change in order to augment the behavior of the individual person is going to be a first-class concern. So actually, for you to succeed with your vision, how much is tech and how much is people is the fundamental question then. And to me then, it becomes this statement, to succeed, operationalizing AI is not about robots, it's about people. And that's, and then basically, how do we now design and invest? How do we invest as companies in the change part in relation
and if
to
I
this?
may add to that, robots and AI, two completely different things as well. Very little AI in robots to start with. But,
so
okay, that's another question.
But AI, so to adopt algorithms or recommender systems is more about people than the algorithm.
Well, or you can phrase it like, the way that products are built today are too much focused on the tech part and too little on the people part.
Yes, but I think this is also interesting. We can take another angle on this. There is one thing how we have had recommender systems succeed quite well in the consumer space, with like Spotify using recommender systems or Amazon using recommender systems, versus when we take AI and recommender systems into B2B space or professional professions. How we need to change the public, like a public servant or a doctor, or even now I'm talking about how the job is done in a manufacturing plant. So I think there is it's a complication here. Like intuitively, the best AI I think today, which is augmenting the human doesn't even know the AI is there. I mean, like a beautiful system.
I would phrase it like differently. The horrible parts of the digitalization process that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years. Take the nurse example. Having to write in the journal in a computer instead of writing with pen and paper has been a horrible process. It's been really bad. And if we can use AI, which is different from digitalization, to make that process much more natural, that will actually make this digitalization process much more smooth and easier to use. I hope people see the differences here between digitalization
but
and AI.
Elaborate on this, Anders, because I don't think people get the difference here. Because what you are saying now, if we're using AI technique like natural language processing, which allows me even to talk to the computer or to do whatever I do, and the AI then translates into systematic process instead of me having to type it all. So now I'm talking about even the AIs seamlessly integrating with how people normally work. And it's basically making the translation over to the systematic approach that we don't really.
Yeah,
that's a quite interesting distinction.
A quick example. Then I'd like to move into another topic with you as well, about Amazon, etc. But just to give an example of this, because I think it's important to see. And if we take the medical domain once again, and we can see previously, you had as a medical profession to sometimes fill out a form saying this is the ICD-19 code of doing whatever diagnosis you had, or you have to fill out this kind of marker or cursor-based kind of diagnosis that you have or symptoms that you have. Instead, if you simply could write in natural language saying, this is actually what happened, and I write it in Swedish or English, and then you have an AI that can understand natural language text, you don't have to have this kind of very structured and not really well-formatted kind of forms that doesn't really fit what we would like to write. You can simply write what you mean and then use AI to understand that. And I think that makes it easier for the humans. It makes it more efficient in the end to process it, because you have a more flexibility in write what you want.
Yeah, because then there is an advantage to me.
Yes.
I get there is a very strong why when I go into it. Yeah. But I can totally understand, I think you said your mother worked as a nurse, because digitalization, which means instead of paper doing it digitally, that has been driven by cutting down workforce. Yeah. And I mean, in hospitals, for example, all the secretaries were taken away. So nurses and doctors had to type themselves. Mm-hmm. So not only was it that you couldn't write with a pen and paper, but you lost a lot of people and had to do this kind of work. And of course, that's not in the favor of AI when people mix that up and say, okay, it's going to be even further.
I think it's being conflated a lot, and the two. And for the police or whatever, I mean, you have this kind of situation where you have to spend so much time on administration instead of doing the real work. And I think AI can actually help a lot with that.
And you took the example of companies where you go on a website as a consumer, and any company that wants you as a customer, they will immediately adopt to what you want. They will have a drive, economic drive to change. But what we are talking about here in hospitals, police, and so on,
it's not my drive.
And they are also much more regulated. I've worked with elder service and social service, and a lot of the fantastic potential things you can do is limited because we have laws. You talked about this some weeks ago, that technology is an enabler, but then it's okay, what do we use it for, and do laws and regulation follow? But there is a huge possibility in the public sector.